Well, in continuing the series of celebrating International Women's Day 2021, and in the interview series of just celebrating women around the globe in business and how they kind of do their work and how it's changed for them in COVID times, I'm delighted to welcome Pamela Bruner, the CEO of Attract Clients Online. Hello, Pamela.
Hello, Ruth. I'm so glad to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure because I've followed you for years and learnt EFT from you, and so to be speaking to you, it's a real joy for me. Thank you. So before we kind of jump in, for people who might never have come across EFT, could you explain kind of what it is and how it came about?
Sure. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. I also call it tapping, as many people do. And it's a simple self-administered acupressure technique that has been scientifically proven to calm the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, and lower the cortisol or the stress hormone levels in the bloodstream. So when we tap, we become calmer and we become more resourceful in our efforts to do anything in life. People use tapping for any number of things. I use it for my specialty, which is business. So I'm a strategic business coach, and I also use this modality called EFT tapping to enhance success, to remove fears around marketing and sales with my clients and things like that.
How did you come across it? Do you remember?
Yes, actually, when I became a coach almost 2 decades ago now, one of my very first, it was introduced in my coach training. They mentioned it, didn't do much with it, and one of my first clients said, "Oh, I use that, it's really good." And so I plunged in and learned a little bit more about it, and it became one of my favorite tools for anything at that time.
So can you give people an example of what kind of things you can use it for? I mean, I appreciate that you use it for a business and for coaching in that way, but in general terms, to give people a real idea.
Let me start with the general thing of saying we often know what we should or could do. We should or could exercise or eat right or not get irritated at our loved ones or not be afraid to put ourselves out in the world. And we know we could or should do those things. And yet there is a strong emotional resistance to doing them. There's a discomfort. Sometimes that masquerades as a strategic interference. Like sometimes we say, well, I would do this, except I've got this thing in my life, I've got this situation, and you're not even looking for a way to get past your obstacle because of that emotional resistance that's there. And one of the things that tapping can do is remove that emotional resistance. So I live in the transformational world. So I coach coaches, healers, experts of all kinds, and it doesn't matter whether somebody is working in relationships or health or spirituality or, as I said, business or money or something like that. It can be used for all these things. I know people do use it for physical healing and physical pain and things like that. Not my area of specialty, but it's used for that as well.
Yes, that's when I first came across EFT. At the time, I was struggling with a really painful sore throat, which it turned out to come from, something else entirely. And I came across this online, someone on stage kind of tapping out a lady's shoulder that was painful. And she was like, "Oh, yes, that's great. I feel it much better." So I was like, so I kind of tapped around and to get rid of my throat pain, and it didn't work. And I thought, oh, this is a load of old rubbish. And then, a few months later, I came across you doing your work, and I just connected with the way you did it. And by that time, I'd moved on a bit and kind of knew what the throat pain was about, and started to use it for different things in the way you use it. And I was like,
you're not alone. And I think the first time I was introduced to tapping, I thought the same thing. I don't use the word rubbish, but I that this is just crazy. Maybe I kind of feel something, maybe not. So often, I think there are people who have a first experience with tapping, and it's fairly dramatic and it's amazing. I think there are a lot of people like you and me, Ruth, who have a first experience with tapping and go, this is weird. It doesn't seem to work unless you work with a good practitioner. I mean, if you went out and tried to hit a tennis ball, without a coach to tell you how you would swing, you might say, well, this is impossible. Nobody can ever hit a tennis ball with a racket, and then you get some more experienced help and the situation changes. It's no different with tapping.
Mm. And so how do you incorporate it into your business?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because for me, there are 3 pillars to business success, particularly for the service-based transformational industry. But there is the tactic, which is what you do. And a lot of people online are selling tactics right now. How do you get clients online? How do you do Facebook ads? How do you do social media? It's all tactics.
Yes, they're everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, tactics are important. But beneath the tactics is strategy. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why does it work or why does it not? And one of the challenges with people teaching tactics, and you can probably tell this is a little bit of a soapbox for me, one of the problems with people teaching tactics, if they don't teach the strategy, if the tactic doesn't work, you don't know why. Like, I turn the key in my car and my car doesn't come on. I don't know why, because I don't know that this strategy, I don't know how an engine works, whereas a mechanic will turn the key, it won't work. He'll look at the engine and he'll know what's going on. He knows the strategy as well as the tactic of turning the key. Mm-hmm. And then the third part, and this is what so many, I think so many people who try to help people in business ignore, is the mindset part. And that's where the tapping comes in. So even if you have the strategy, even if you have the tactic, you know why you're doing it, you know what you need to be doing it. Do you have the how behind, do you have the mindset behind it to say, yes, I can step into this. I feel comfortable stepping into this. I may not even be competent at it yet, but I'm willing to fail forward and keep doing it until I become comfortable with it. And often that is what we're working on with the tapping. Does that help?
Yes, it does. How often do you find people start with an issue like maybe they're afraid to put themselves out there with the business, and you tap on it when you're doing it one-to-one, and you tap on it and actually the issue is something completely different from, perhaps something way back in the past? That
happens about 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time.
Yes.
So this whole idea of, if you're afraid to put yourself out there, it probably did not start 5 days ago when you decided you needed to make a post on Facebook. It probably started when you were 7 years old and you did something very cool in front of some guests at your house, and your mother was furious at you for, putting yourself out there or grabbing the attention. Or I'm just making this up, but certainly something like this is much more common. And there are modalities where they'll dig back in the past and try to figure it out. And tapping can be useful with those modalities and very effective. And sometimes we don't need to go back into the past. Sometimes we can create another scenario or a reframe or some workaround in the mind. So you don't have to necessarily clean out all the junk, but you can just move forward. And that's where I think tapping can be a super effective modality for taking shortcuts to action.
Yeah, and you're the only person I've ever come across, and I think another reason why I connected with you so much, once you've tapped out the negative, you tap in the positive, and I just love that, because especially if it's something small, perhaps you don't need to, but if it's something about confidence, as you're tapping that back in, you can feel yourself rising and feeling far more confident, and I just love that idea. And is that something that you created yourself?
I'm certainly not the only person who does tapping on the positive. There are 2 reasons, I believe, why you do that. In the original, and you call it tapping on the positive, I call it creating a reframe. So it is some new perspective, but it doesn't matter what terminology you use. Gary Craig, who created the original EFT, used to basically sort of be against providing reframes because his belief was that the person would naturally come up with their own reframe. And I believe that if you're working in the area of self-acceptance or self-love, it might be the case that somebody will create their own reframe. after removing their feelings of limitation or lack of self-worth or anything like that, they will go, oh, I have a new awareness now. But in an area where the person you're working with has less expertise, like say business, or even in the area of health, if somebody is limited in their health resources, they may not have enough domain expertise to create the reframe. They may not have a perspective to create the reframe. So I believe that you create that positive reframe for that reason. And sometimes I'll just, sometimes I'll help someone create a reframe by saying, what's a new way you could look at it? And they'll give me the reframe. That's certainly possible, and work on that. The second reason to create a positive reframe or tap in the positive, as you say, is that tapping, to me, really doesn't tap in the positive, but what the positive does is it enables anything that's in the way of the positive. Like as you get rid of the negative and you're talking about the positive, if there's any lingering negatives left, they will come up there and you're still tapping, so those get taken care of too. So it's kind of like making sure that you've finished the clearing.
Yes. Oh, okay, that's good. And another thing about EFT, which is probably worth mentioning, is that even if you think it's, it's not going to work, and it does anyway. It clears the system, doesn't it? And it works, and it stays. It's not a technique where you have to stay present and be in the moment forevermore for that clearing to have worked. Once it's done, it's done.
Mm-hmm. I find that the reason that tapping doesn't seem to work sometimes, there are two reasons really. One is because you've cleared part of the problem in the moment, but a deeper problem exists, and you have to, it's like you took off a tree branch, but you need to go in and get the roots of the tree.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason. Another reason, and one of the only times I've seen tapping not work for people who are skeptical, is they are not in touch with their emotions. Because tapping doesn't work on a thought, it works on feelings.
Yes.
You're retraining the nervous system, not the rational mind. So if you are going, yeah, I'm afraid of this, yeah, I'm afraid of this, yeah, I'm afraid of this, and you're not in touch with your fear, nothing will happen. And that's the one time when I've had people say, well, it doesn't seem to work. So what are you feeling right now? How strong is fear? Oh, I'm not afraid right now. Well, then we can't get rid of the fear. You have to be in touch with it.
Well, that's really interesting, because I worked with someone, and it was unwelcome visitors coming, welcome for like 5 minutes, and then wish they would go. and I, worked with them on that, and then I spoke to them afterwards, and the one that next seen, this visitor, and they said no, it didn't work. And I was like, oh, that's funny, why didn't it work? And they said, oh, maybe we could do it again. And I was a bit hesitant, because I thought, well, if it didn't work the first time, it's probably not going to work the second time. And that was it, actually. There wasn't an emotional shift. You could see, when I was working with her, that although she was going through the motions of the tapping and repeating, and I was encouraging her to, speak her words and her feelings, she still wasn't as connected as I expected when it was such a big issue for her. So maybe it was just she was a bit afraid to get in touch with the emotion and let it go.
Yeah. I mean, most people, when you talk to them, they're certainly willing to complain. Like, it's like, how do you really feel when these people overstay their welcome? Oh, you wouldn't believe it. It's terrible. And then they're in touch with their emotions. And some people, for whatever reason, have trained themselves, which is not a bad thing, to compartmentalize their emotions. If they do that, the tapping can't get in either. So.
Yes. And when I think about, that person, that would kind of sum them up as well, really. And that's interesting, very interesting. Talk about how you incorporate it into your business, but I've seen you do a lot of YouTube videos, and you do generic tapping to give people an idea of how it works. How difficult is that for you to do a generic issue? Is it something that you've worked through yourself years before, and so the kind of issues that people might be experiencing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've worked in more general success areas, not necessarily business areas. And over the years, I've sort of narrowed down into business. The thing is, my belief and desires are for people to step into their greatness, and for them to live a life free of the limitations and the doubts and the fears and that kind of thing. And I believe tapping is a really good modality to do that. So and I've chosen an arena I think I can make a difference in. I know that if I just went out there, this is part of my business coaching too, if I just went out there and said, oh, I can help everybody and you need to get rid of your limiting beliefs, I would not be nearly as effective as I am honing down. So I've certainly shared general tapping things, and here's tapping for success. And, the book I wrote with Jack Canfield, Tapping into Ultimate Success, deals in more areas than just business. It deals in health and relationships and all kinds of things. But really it is starting that awareness of it doesn't have to be this way. Let's find a better way.
Mm. And how has the last 12 months changed your business with the way COVID's kicked in?
Actually, my business has done very well with COVID, and I've pivoted to entirely online. I was doing some live events, some in-person events. Now I do all my events online, and I enjoy it. My team's gone entirely virtual. We're all happy with that. I'm able to serve far more people internationally than I did before. Mm-hmm. So the things that I think have troubled many people have not troubled me as much. I do know that because we can't meet face-to-face or shake hands or things like that, some of the advice that I have given clients in the past is now changed, and we're all working online. So in that sense, I've had to pivot what I teach to people, and that has created new challenges for me and for others. But that's really the only challenge.
That's good. And so will you no longer do live events when everybody can be, back meeting people? Will you keep it as an online business now?
Currently, my intention is to keep it as a virtual business so I can continue to serve people better in different time zones without the travel expense and things like that.
Yes, of course, yeah. And more people at one time, I suppose, as well, by doing it online.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so if people are interested in learning more about your work, where should they go, Pamela?
attractclientsonline.com is my website, and I hope that they'll come find me there.
Okay, and is there any social media places that they can come and find you, or is it just your website?
I'm certainly active on Facebook and LinkedIn. I do have a social media presence, so you can connect with me on Facebook, but the website's got the most goodies on it.
Okay, so they should go there.
Yes.
That's lovely, Pamela. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome, Ruth. Thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure.